Hey, Sarah, Fiona, and Kristen, and now more people are coming in. Um, I just decided to go live today instead of setting it up earlier today. I don't really know why, but it's Jacksonville. We were just down in Jacksonville. What a beautiful beach you have. Lake Tahoe. Have never been there. And here we go, Elaine Benavides from Hampton, Connecticut, and Kristen's here. So it looks like we've got a lot of people here, and I'm going to jump right in because, as you know, I'm trying to do these shorter than I have in the past. And also, we have a wonderful new member of the team who's been cutting these into smaller videos, so you can watch them that way if you'd rather. All right, so I took a look at all of your questions. And I'm going to go in a couple of places, but I'm going to go in a place to begin with that only a few people asked about, but that's really important and really cool. Cool in the historical sense. So I want to talk today about Operation Spiderweb. This was the operation out of the Ukrainian military, the special advisors in Ukraine, special operatives in Ukraine, that put 117 drones into either 4 or 5 airports or military airplane installations deep into Russia, and very successfully targeted those drones at weak points in more than 40 aircraft, bombers primarily, and destroyed about $7 billion, about 34% of Russia's aircraft with these drones. And the reason that I want to talk about that is twofold today. One is that that's a game changer in the war of Russia on Ukraine, but also because it's a game changer in war strategies themselves. This is a really big deal. And when I say really big deal, so you think about the history of warfare, different technologies dramatically change warfare. So for example, in the American Civil War, which is the war I know best, all of the tactics stopped being operative in that war because the United States began to manufacture in high numbers rifles. And the difference between a rifle and a musket is that a rifle actually has inside the barrel sort of a bead that enables a bullet, an elongated bullet, to spin as it fires. And those longer bullets that could spin as they fired were so much more accurate that it was rather like throwing a fast ball versus a knuckleball. And that meant that rifles became far more accurate than they had ever been before. So it's a real game changer. Similarly, the concept of total war in that war changes the way people think about war. Well, in the case of Operation Spiderweb, the reason it matters in the struggle between Russia and Ukraine is this. First of all, in 1994, with the Budapest Memorandum, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Russia guaranteed to Ukraine protection of its sovereignty, that they would not invade either economically or invade the Ukraine's sovereignty on the condition that Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons. It did so, and it was supposed to have this protection of its sovereignty, but Russia broke that in 2014 when it invaded Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula. And there's now a bridge to that peninsula called the Kerch Bridge. I'll tell you more about in a second. But so when Russia invaded Crimea, the United States stood behind Ukraine and put sanctions on Russia, started to equip the Ukrainian military, and so on. And that was a bipartisan support for Ukraine after the 2014 invasion. That's one of the reasons that Russia got involved in the 2016 American presidential race, because they wanted those sanctions taken off, and they wanted the incoming American president, if it were Donald Trump, to sort of wink as they tried to take over the 4 eastern oblasts of Ukraine. So the United States has always stood on the side, since then, has stood on the side of Ukraine. But Donald Trump changed that when he went into office, pretty dramatically changing it on February 28th, 2025, when he had Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky into the Oval Office, and he and JD Vance sort of blindsided him and made it very clear that they were siding with Russia. They kept saying, "You don't have the cards," if you remember that saying. And a lot of people were really horrified that the United States was pretty openly supporting Russia in its attack on Ukraine rather than what we had traditionally done. So in the moment that we're in now, so what happened after that is that Ukraine and European countries began to work together to try and make up the slack that the United States was now, the scope that it was now giving to Russia. But at the same time, Ukraine began to say, okay, to Donald Trump, okay, you want a ceasefire? We're behind a ceasefire. They agreed to a ceasefire. I think it was March 11th. And of course, Vladimir Putin, who is the president of Russia, has simply refused to do that. In fact, he has increased the bombing of Ukraine, both with aerial bombing and with drones, even as he claimed to be talking about a ceasefire with Donald Trump. So Trump has been sort of saying he's frustrated, but at the same time, he's not doing anything to make Russia come to the table to do things like sanctions. Now, interestingly enough, in the Senate, there is a bipartisan move. There are now 80 senators from both parties that are co-sponsoring tighter sanctions or higher sanctions on Russia. But until Donald Trump gets behind it, there's no point to push that forward. So they currently are not. But the reason I just set all that up is that's where things stood until June 1st, when Operation Spiderweb, which is the name of this operation to send these drones into very deep into Russia and to hit military targets as opposed to the civilian targets that the Russians have been hitting in Ukraine. This is a game changer because the United States was not informed that this was happening. And what it did was it illustrated to the Russians that the Ukrainians could bring the war home to them. And you're seeing in a number of places people saying, oh, it's Russia's Pearl Harbor, but it's really not, because America's Pearl Harbor, which was December 7th of 1941, the United States was not involved in World War II when that happened. It got involved. And the timing, I actually did out the months today. It's rather as if America had a Pearl Harbor in January of 1945, when it had already been involved in that war for more than 3 years. So this was a really big sign of Russia's vulnerability. And then today, the Ukrainians hit the Kerch Bridge, not as in such a damaging way, but again, demonstrating that they can hit crucial targets. And those are both very symbolic. The attack on the aircraft was on a Russian military holiday, and Putin always likes to hit things on special days to him. And the Kerch Bridge is something that Putin feels very strongly about. That's sort of one of his babies. So what they were doing for this moment is to say, you might want to get yourselves to the bargaining table, because we got a lot of stuff up our sleeves. All right. So that's why it matters in terms of Russia and Ukraine. But in terms of the war strategy of countries going forward, the drones that the Ukrainians used to hit $7 billion worth of aircraft cost between $600 and $1,000 a piece. Now, you do that math. What this has shown is the extraordinary power of asymmetric warfare. That's when those sides aren't even. And so long as one side is very adaptable, has quick technology, and has really good intelligence. So all of a sudden, all of the countries that have just been pouring their energies into having the most stuff, the most hardware, including the United States, which, the Donald Trump administration wants to put $1 trillion into the US military, much of it into hardware, are looking at the fact that this group of very agile, very secretive, because they didn't let it out for 18 months, operatives managed to destroy almost 35%. And again, we don't know for sure because you never really know the numbers in warfare, and different sides exaggerate or downplay their numbers and so on and so forth. But they demonstrated that with an extremely small inlay of money and the use of technology and intelligence, they were able to have this major strike against a major military power. And that all of a sudden, if you're following this at all today, it's been a fascinating day because all sorts of people who are interested in war strategy are like, we knew this moment was coming, but it's just weird to see it. And that's one of the reasons that I'm calling it out now, is because, again, when you teach the American Civil War, for example, you cannot teach that war without talking about the importance of rifles and of artillery. It changes everything. And you get these different technological moments that change warfare, and this is one of them. So it's I just wanted to call it out because it's a game changer, not only for the geopolitical structure right now between Russia and Ukraine, but also for how countries prepare for war going forward. So I wanted to call that out just so that people are watching that. I'm not suggesting things are going to happen tomorrow, but those of us who are going to be lucky enough to be watching this for the next generation, and I'm obviously not at my age, they're going to write this in the history books as here's a day that really mattered because it illustrated what you can do with technology and intelligence in the modern world with the capabilities that we now have to have, in this case, piloted drones that operated underneath the radars, the air defenses of Russia, because they were able to use intelligence essentially and to use the civilian population to deliver those drones to right outside the airfields. If you're interested in this, as you can tell, I am. There are now pictures available from the BBC at the very least. There may be more. Those are the ones I was looking at, of the drones that were actually put inside the roofs of wooden structures, cabins that the Ukrainians had delivered by truck drivers to the sites where they needed them, as if they were actually mobile homes. And to me, to my eyes, they look for all the world like bats nestled in the crawl spaces of an attic. I mean, they're literally drones. They look like drones, but they're kind of nestled in there. It's just as a historian, you can tell I'm sort of gobsmacked that to have seen this day, because you don't usually get to watch history change in the news in front of you, and this did. All right. So that you asked other questions, and you've asked a lot of questions about the Republicans' omnibus bill that they are calling the One Big Beautiful Bill. That is literally the name that they have chosen for this bill. And I'm going to walk you through a little bit of that again. I did that earlier. I think it was last Thursday as well. But before I do that, I want to start with an observation that in America we don't make very often, and we really, really should. And that's that for all that the Republicans have been screaming since the 1980s that taxes are too high in the United States, in fact, the American system is a very low tax system. And the comparison I'm going to make here is to the other 38 countries in the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. A terrible name, by the way. I have to look up what it stands for every time I want to talk about it. Usually we talk about those countries as the OECD countries. And as I say, there are 38 of them, and they're characterized by having advanced economies, developed economies. And so people, when they're looking at the different systems that people have, they tend to group the OECD countries together. And when you do that, and you take a look at average taxation rates according to GDP, because we're all different sizes, right? But you look at the gross product, the amount of economic output of all those countries, and you look to see at what rate they are taxed. The United States is at the very bottom. I think there are 4 countries below us. We're at right now at about, I wrote down the numbers, at about a tax rate of 25.2% of our GDP. Now, the top countries on that list are at greater than 41% of their GDP, but the average is 33.9% of their GDP. That's the average of these 38 countries. And the reason I point that out is because if in fact the United States got to the average, and remember we're the wealthiest country in the world, if we just got to the average of the OECD countries, we would, which is 33.9%, we would have more than $26 trillion over the next 10 years in revenue. If we got just to that level, not up to the top, just to that level. And while I'm talking about that, I also want to point out that the deficit that we are talking about in our budget, which is the difference between the revenue coming in and the amount that we spend, the deficit in 2023 was $1.7 trillion. Okay, so if we just got to the average, we would have that deficit covered. And remember, we have been there before fairly recently in that it was under Bill Clinton, in the Bill Clinton administration, that in fact we didn't run a deficit. But since we were in the black, we were bringing in more than we were spending. But after that, we got the George W. Bush tax cuts, the unfunded wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and now the Trump tax cuts of 2017. And that's what's put us in the red. I also wanted to call out the fact that the national debt as of April 2025, 2 months ago, was $36.2 trillion, much of which, of course, is thanks to Donald Trump's first term. But as I said, if we just went up to the average of the OECD countries, we would have $26 trillion over the next 10 years. So before I talk about anything having to do with this one big beautiful bill, I wanted to put that out there because we don't talk about taxes in the United States anymore, and we should, because it's the Republican Party that invented national income taxes and what they called manufacturing taxes. And until 1981, if the United States was outlaying more than it was bringing in, the first thing that Congress would do is say, let's take a look at taxes, before they went to cuts, although they cut too, but that's really where they started. So now, with that background there, this omnibus bill, the one big beautiful bill, as they call it, that the Republicans are looking at, is a combination of everything the Republicans want. It's like the kitchen sink in there. And many people have called out the fact that it does make it very difficult to enforce contempt of court orders. What is not in the bill that you're seeing everywhere is that it can stop elections. That's not there. There are things that the administration is trying to do to change American elections, but that's not in that bill. It frustrates me when we put stuff out there like that, because if it's in there, people like me haven't found it, and I haven't seen anybody actually be able to point to where that is. I could be wrong, by the way, but that's what it looks like to me. But they put all kinds of things in that bill. But the reason that Trump wanted everything in that bill is because there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. We need to find some way to deal with the budget, which has not actually been funded yet. That's what's in the big, beautiful whatever. We also have the upcoming problem of the debt ceiling, which I've talked about before. That is a holdover from World War I, which says that Congress can appropriate all the money it wants, as it does, but the Treasury can only borrow up to a certain amount. And we hit that limit in January of 2025. And right now, the Treasury is using extraordinary measures to fund the government, but those extraordinary measures will run out. The Treasury Secretary is estimating now in August, so they have to do something before August. But at the same time, Trump wants to extend his tax cuts. And the extension of the tax cuts, according to the Congressional Budget Office, which is run, by the way, by a Republican, although Trump and Mike Johnson's House Speaker keeps saying they're Democrats. In fact, the director of the CBO is a Republican, and the CBO is kind of the gold standard. They've got a great reputation for their economic predictions. The CBO says that extending those tax cuts will cost a minimum of $4.3 trillion over the next 10 years. So when you look at that bill, what it does is a number of things. It has a lot of cuts to the United States programs that a lot of Americans rely on, including cuts to Medicaid. And the Republicans are trying to say they're only getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. But as I wrote last night, that's simply not true. They're getting rid of nutrition programs. They're getting rid of all sorts of things that don't actually save a ton of money compared to the amount of money that they are throwing into those tax cuts and into increasing the budget for Homeland Security and for defense. So one of the things that you're looking at when you're looking at that bill are these cuts to the social programs that Americans need to survive. There's cuts to housing. There's all kinds of cuts in the bill. But those cuts do not make up for the extraordinary tax cuts and the rising investment in the military and in immigration enforcement and so on. So one of the things that people have asked about is, what's going on with that? It passed the House of Representatives, and now a number of members of the House are saying, "Well, we didn't know this was in it. We didn't know that was in it." It passed on a party line vote. That's Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, saying she did not know that it prohibits states from regulating artificial intelligence for 10 years. That's in the bill. Somebody else said they didn't know that it stopped contempt of court procedures. And Jasmine Crockett, who's a Democrat from Texas, said, "Well, I knew about it. We talked about it in the committee. You were sitting there. You can say you didn't know about it, but we certainly talked about it." So they're backing off because they're hearing a lot of people being upset about that. And again, you're seeing Republicans saying, "We're not really cutting Medicaid. We're cutting $700 billion over the next 10 years to strengthen it." Good luck with that. So you're hearing about that bill. It's now going to the Senate, and the Senate is already tearing it apart for various reasons, not least because there are a number of senators who are very vulnerable in 2026, Republican senators who are now trying to back away. And you saw Joni Ernst there, for example, who's also vulnerable, saying, well, yeah, it cuts Medicaid, but people are going to die. We're all going to die. When somebody said, "People are going to die," she answered, "Yeah, well, we're all going to die." That wasn't a very good answer to people's concerns about Medicaid. So you are going to see people pushing back against it in the Senate, and I would urge you, if you care about it, to push back. But one of the things that you asked me to talk about was Musk today, Elon Musk, the billionaire who has been running the Department of Government Efficiency, saying, "I'm going to admit it, I hate this bill." This is a big deal in that what Musk wants is he wants to get rid of all the government programs that most Americans actually like. That's the National Weather Service, Medicaid, all the things that we count on to keep the world moving. Because what he wants to do is get rid of that government and use the revenue from the US government to fund his attempt to get to Mars. And so his idea is to get, remember, he just wanted to cut the government, so that money could be used for his project to get to Mars. Now, that's never what Donald Trump wanted. He wanted to cut the government so he could put his own people into those jobs. And that dovetails much more closely with the people running Project 2025 and with the people who embrace it, like Russell Vogt, who's the he's the director of the Office of Management and Budget. And Vogt is a Christian nationalist who wants a big, strong federal government to force religious rule on the rest of America, including, getting rid of abortion, for example, and getting rid of gay rights and getting rid of all the aspects of the modern secular government that people like him and people like those who are now running Hungary believe have poisoned their country. So this fight over this bill is partly about the budget, but what it's really about is what kind of government are we going to have? Is it going to be a government that answers to the needs of ordinary Americans, or is it going to be a government that simply creates opportunities for the extremely wealthy to put more of our revenue into their own pockets? And to impose religious rule on us. And that's another thing about taxes always to remember is it's our money. It is literally our money that we elect people to office to determine how we will spend. So when you think about that bill, don't just focus on the individual pieces of it. Think about what you want from your government. All right. So another thing that people asked me to talk about is I'm just going to throw this out there quickly. It is worth watching President Trump. He is mentally falling apart. And it's time to hold his feet to the fire because, when a president posts something like that his predecessor was assassinated in 2020 and it has been replaced by a robot, that's something that's not okay. This is a man who is one of the most powerful people in the world, has his hand on the nuclear football. And I'm really tired of people being like, oh, well, that's just Trump. It's not okay. You would not elect that man to run for, your local transportation department. So why people are shrugging when he is behaving the way he is not okay. But quickly, you also asked me to talk a little bit about the Democrats, which I have not done. I haven't written about because honestly, part of Trump's nuttiness is that is at least in some part the attempt to throw so much crap at us that we're constantly scrambling. And you will notice if you read my letters, which once again are available for free, both on Facebook and on Substack, what you'll notice is that because I'm trying to keep a record for the future, what you'll notice is they've gotten a lot longer. I try and throw short ones in there, but there's just so much every freaking day. So, I talk about the Democrats more than I write about them because they're not nuts, and it's like, I say this whole idea of distracting us all the time works because you had to pay attention to all the details if you were running across the savannah, because otherwise you'd get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. I know nothing about paleography, really, so I probably got that wrong, but you get the point, right? So in this moment, one of the things that people have asked me about is, why didn't people talk about Joe Biden being senile when he was in office? And I'm just going to say on that front, if you judge, first of all, in my observation, and I did not spend a huge amount of time with President Biden, but I did spend time with him. I did talk to him. What I always saw was a man with a fairly severe stutter who when he got tired, the stutter got worse. But I never saw him unable to answer questions that were not scripted. And to have a really good command of a wide range of material that was important. Now we know, of course, that Donald Trump doesn't even read his presidential daily briefing. So this idea somehow that he was kept hidden he was the president of the United States. Of course, he wasn't kept hidden. And one of the things that I look at when I evaluate presidents is what are they getting done? And the Biden administration was one of the most consequential presidencies in American history. It got major legislation passed. It got major foreign relations stuff done. If you think about that disastrous debate that Biden did, that was when he was negotiating the largest prisoner swap in American history that got back Evan Gershkovich for the United States and all these other prisoners as well. So somehow this idea that there was this great conspiracy and Biden wasn't really doing anything just doesn't hold water for me. I don't care if our president is a disembodied brain in formaldehyde. If they are producing at the rate that the Biden administration was producing, I don't care what the rest of the package looks like. So that's what I have to say about Biden and this idea that somehow there's, should be hell to pay for no one talking about Biden's abilities. I mean, I watched him really closely because, I was one of the few people who actually was reporting on that administration rather than on whatever Trump was doing in that moment. And I just find it enormously frustrating that so many people nowadays are saying, well, you didn't tell us, for example, stuff about the Budapest Memorandum, or you didn't tell us. It was all there. It was an incredibly transparent administration. And, they gave press conferences every day from all the major departments, and it just didn't get any press coverage. So that being said, now when we look at what the Democrats are doing, one of the things again that frustrates me is people talk about the Democrats as having doubled down on identity politics and so on. What the Democrats have done is they have permitted the Republicans to define them. So if you look at the Biden Harris administration, certainly when Harris took over in the presidency, the presidential campaign of 2024, she literally never talked about identity politics. She literally never did that. It was the Republicans who pinned that on the Democrats. The Democrats kept trying to talk about kitchen table issues. Now, my impression of that is enormously important to people. As you know, my take on politics is that people need to feel that they are part of something larger, and that, at some point talking about gas prices is really not necessarily going to sway people. And we know, in fact, that it did not, for all that the media insisted that everybody was voting according to gas prices. In fact, it became very clear they were not. So what the Democrats are doing now seems to me to be enormously healthy. Like I'm unbelievably sick of people sitting there saying, well, this is what the Democrats should have done in the past, because I don't believe in going backward. And I'm really tired of postmortems. But what you are seeing is an increasing number of Democrats and independents and former Republicans. Joe Walsh today, who was a Republican representative, joined the Democratic Party. What you're seeing is them starting to talk about the things that are important to them. And you're seeing it from a lot of different places, a lot of new voices and a new up and coming voices. And to my mind, people keep saying we need someone to gather around. I disagree with that. And I'm not a political operative, by the way, so you can discount this. But when I look at moments when there is extraordinary upheaval in a society, I don't really want to see one voice at the beginning. I want to see a lot of voices at the beginning talking about what's important to them, because they start to coalesce and say, okay, if you've got these 15 topics, all of us care about, and you can fill in the blank. To me, healthcare seems to be pretty high up on that list. But, as you know, one of my big things is NOAA, and scientific investigation, scientific research that's being gutted. That might not be your top issue. But the more we hear about these things, the more you will see people starting to examine how they think the country should go into the future. And once we have figured that out, and the definition of what that looks like may not come from a politician, or it may come from a politician you've never heard of. Once we have figured that out, then we will absolutely rally around different leaders who are doing that. And so I'm watching a lot of people really closely to see what they are saying and how they are saying it, and to see the new voices that are coming forward, the younger voices that you may not have ever heard of. And some of the people that I'm watching are not household names yet, but they could become household names. And that's, really interesting to me. So every time you hear a new voice, you hear people saying, well, he's running for office. She's running for office. What politician isn't running for office? They're testing the waters. They're seeing what's out there. That's great. They can do that. We need them to do that. And we need to see who we want to listen to and who we don't want to listen to. And the more we make our voices heard, the more they will get feedback on what they are saying. And we will start to coalesce around one person or another. And then when that moment comes, what you will see is the weighing of different constituencies. And, to go back for a second to Biden and Harris, one of the reasons that I was not keen on Biden dropping out of the race in 2024 was because Biden and Harris worked in 2020 because they nailed together two separate constituencies. And losing Biden out of that, it required Harris to move forward. She obviously brought an older looking, anyway, white man onto the ticket with her to see if they could pick up those same constituencies again. Obviously didn't work. But when you pick somebody at the end of the day, most people don't get their top choices because we're a big country, and you got to put a lot of different voices together into a coalition that enough people can live with, that they will vote for it. So in this moment, I am 100% not exercised about there not being one leader of the Democrats. I think it's good that there isn't one leader of the Democrats, because we get to hear a lot of different people, and we get to, more importantly, we get to hear a lot of different ideas. And what I am drawing on here to make this argument is not only the fact that this is how we got Abraham Lincoln, who was a very little known one-term representative in the 1850s, a corporate lawyer who listened to what people were saying and came out of the box and put down all the many rivals for the presidency in 1860, because enough people said, yeah, we can live with him. And we like the kind of stuff he's saying, that he became, obviously this person who defined America in the 1850s. But it's also exactly how we got Theodore Roosevelt, the Republican president in the early 1900s, who rose in a similar moment by listening primarily to Democrats. He took the program of people like Grover Cleveland and the reformers that Grover Cleveland had brought to his ticket in the 1880s and 1890s. So what we're seeing, I think, is that same kind of ferment. So somebody's going to emerge, but you don't really want a front runner right now to lead a party, because it just makes them incredibly vulnerable. And we don't need a mudslinging fight right now. We need people to focus on what they don't like about the Trump administration and what they would like to see America become. Once again, I'm going to encourage you to do that. Speak to your, write and call your congresspeople all the time. Somebody said, does it matter? Are we achieving anything? 100%. If you look at how Kristi Noem has had to back off when the sheriffs went after her statement about sanctuary cities, if you look at the number of times that Trump has had to back off on tariffs, the list is very, very long of the number of times that the administration has felt obliged to back off. Now, it hasn't backed off on some of the most important things. Its attack on the rule of law and on its attack on due process with regard to immigrants coming to the United States, but pressure 100% works. So keep that up, but also talk about what's important to you. Encourage those leaders who are talking about the things that are important to you. Recognize that you do not have to agree with everybody on your team. Because, like I say, we're very much in a period of flux, and we're all supposed to be advocating for the things we care about, and we're not going to get everything we want, but that's how politics works. So advocate for things. Use art. Use your voices. If you are planning to protest on June 14th, do so, but please learn the rules for protesting, so that you stay safe, and that you don't encourage violent resistance to you. There's a number of organizations that are circulating the ways in which to do that. You can also be trained to do that. Make sure to do all of those things. So I'm going to hope to leave you here with some hope going forward. It's summer, lots of stuff's going to be happening, and just with a reminder that I'm going to keep on trying to do these shorter. I went over today. I will be here again on Thursday at 6 o'clock. If you're not reading me, somebody pointed out the other day that I am active on a number of platforms and I don't ever cross-pollinate them. I am available every night. I write a letter about what happened in America that day, tying it into American history. It's available for free, both on Facebook and on Substack. On Substack, don't put in your credit card unless you want to be charged. You don't have to. You get the same thing. You just don't get to comment, and you don't get some of the extras I put out. But that main letter will be available. And for those of you watching me on Facebook, I do have a YouTube channel. And finally, I want to tease something that I'm really excited about. And that's that we've actually been working on something now for close to a year. And we're just about to go live with it this weekend. We are expecting to go live with it unless something big happens in the news. I'm not going to tip my hand any more than that, but I hope you like it. And I really hope you like it. And if you do, there'll be a lot more where that comes from. So look for that over the weekend. I'll mention it again on Thursday, and I will see you then. So thank you for being here.